Today, we're going to talk about how the ancient art of war is being completely rewritten for the digital age. We're going to trace a line all the way from the classic battlefield to your web browser to figure out what the new rules of conflict really are.
So let's start with a core concept: maneuver. For literally thousands of years, this has been the heart and soul of military strategy. It's the art of moving your pieces on the board to get the upper hand, to outsmart your opponent, ideally before a single shot is even fired.
Okay, but that brings up a huge question for our time. In cyberspace, a world with no hills to take, no rivers to cross, no front lines, what does a positional advantage even mean? How do you maneuver in a place like that? And believe me, the answer changes everything.
To really get a handle on where we're going, we've got to take a quick look back at where we've been. So let's trace how this big idea of gaining an advantage has evolved over time.
It all started with basic tactics, right? Like the Romans surrounding an enemy force. Then Napoleon took it up a notch, maneuvering whole armies across Europe. Fast forward to World War II, and the German Blitzkrieg wasn't just about destruction, it was about shock and disrupting the enemy's ability to think. And that led to the next big leap in the 1980s with Colonel John Boyd. He argued that the ultimate maneuver isn't physical at all, it's cognitive. It's about getting inside your enemy's decision-making cycle, their OODA loop, and short-circuiting their ability to react.
And that idea, getting inside the enemy's head, brings us right to today, where that very same principle is being applied to the new battlefield: cyberspace.
So if you remember one thing from this, make it this. In traditional kinetic warfare, you move your forces, your soldiers, your tanks. In cyber warfare, you don't really move forces. Instead, you move the point of attack itself. It moves through virtual space. That is the single biggest shift you need to wrap your head around.
So here's our working definition. Cyber maneuver is all about using code as a force to do the same thing generals have always tried to do: get a position of advantage. The goal hasn't changed one bit, but the battlefield and the weapons, they are completely new.
And this quote from Parks and Duggan just nails it. You're not moving an army that people can see and track. You're moving an invisible threat from one corner of the internet to another, making it incredibly hard to see what's coming next.
All right, so this new kind of maneuver doesn't play by the old rules. It has its own, frankly, kind of terrifying characteristics that make it unlike anything we've ever seen before.
First up, speed. Cyber attacks happen literally at the speed of light, at machine speeds. But our ability to understand what's happening and decide how to respond, well, that's stuck at human speed. This creates a massive, dangerous gap. The attacker always has the advantage.
Second, reach. In the real world, geography is destiny. It limits how far you can go. In cyberspace, distance is basically meaningless. An attack can be launched from a coffee shop on one continent to shut down a power grid on another, with zero physical barriers in the way.
And third, stealth. Attackers are like ghosts in the machine. They hide their tracks by bouncing their attacks between hacked computers in dozens of different countries. This makes figuring out who is actually behind an attack one of the hardest problems in modern conflict.
And that's not even the whole story. We're seeing attackers build digital forward bases inside networks. They use botnets, these giant zombie armies of hijacked computers, to hit tons of targets all at once. The whole thing is just constantly, dynamically evolving.
So, knowing all that, what does this actually look like in the real world? Let's open up the playbook for both the offense and the defense.
On the offense, you've got three basic moves. Exploitive maneuver is just a fancy term for spying, stealing information. Influencing maneuver is about psychological operations, messing with data to screw up an enemy's decisions. But that one in the middle, positional maneuver, that's the real game changer.
So what is positional maneuver? Think of it as the digital equivalent of secretly putting your troops behind enemy lines. It's about quietly taking control of key systems, not to cause damage right away, but to get into position so you can land a knockout blow later.
You want a real-world example? This is a wild one. Back in 2007, Israeli jets reportedly flew into Syria and hit a target. And Syria's super advanced air defenses? They never saw them coming. Why? Because a cyber attack had apparently blinded their radar at the perfect moment. That attack was positional maneuver. The digital groundwork was laid long before those jets ever left the runway.
So how in the world do you defend against something like that? Well, the defensive playbook is evolving too. It's not just about building a bigger firewall anymore. Defenders are using deception, luring attackers into fake systems called honeypots to spy on them. They can counterattack. Or they can do something that's literally impossible in the physical world.
It's called moving target defense. Instead of building a static castle wall, imagine if your defenses were constantly changing shape. You're randomizing IP addresses, memory layouts, you're making the target almost impossible to pin down because it's never the same from one second to the next.
And we've seen a version of this in action. In 2008, during huge cyber attacks, the country of Georgia didn't just sit there and defend. It maneuvered. It literally picked up its government websites and moved them onto servers in friendly countries like the US and Estonia, moving the target completely out of the attacker's reach.
And all of this, it leads us to the biggest and, frankly, the messiest question of all. When an attack can bounce across a dozen neutral countries to hit a target, what happens to our old ideas about borders and national sovereignty?
I mean, in the physical world, we have maps, we have lines on the ground. It's pretty clear where one country ends and another begins. But online, it's a total mess. Is a nation's border the physical box a server sits in? Or is it a logical network, like the US military's .mil domain, which physically exists in over 88 countries? That ambiguity is where all the trouble starts.
And don't think for a second that this is just about data breaches. This is about real-world, physical destruction. This is the estimated number of Iranian nuclear centrifuges that were physically broken, destroyed, by a computer virus called Stuxnet. A piece of code crossed borders and caused tangible, kinetic damage.
Which leaves us with one last, really challenging question. A missile strike that destroyed 1,000 centrifuges. That would almost certainly be considered an act of war, right? No question. So why is a cyber attack that achieves the exact same result often treated so differently? As this new battlefield keeps evolving, that's the question the world still doesn't have an answer for.